The United Nations says that more than 13,000 people forced to flee their homes by the start of the new year. David Gracie discusses Yemen's humanitarian crisis with Saudi officials in Riyadh. Liberating the city of Harat paves the way to final battle against Houthi militia. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shahzad Dilbey. UN Special Envoy to Yemen Hans Grunberg expressed his concern over the recent escalation in the country. In a phone call with the Yemeni Foreign Minister Ahmed bin Mubarak, Grunberg confirmed that he will continue his efforts that aim at establishing an exclusive political process to guarantee the return of security and stability to Yemen. For his part, the Yemeni minister considered the recent Houthi escalation a serious threat to regional and international peace. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees said more than 13,000 Yemenis were displaced and forced to flee their homes during the first month of 2022. The UNHCR stated that this number is added to the total of 4.2 million people who were forced to flee their homes. Last month, the Houthi militia forced a large number of peoples to flee from Ma'rib and the outskirts of Shabwa when they restored to using their homes as military fortifications. The Saudi ambassador to Yemen, Mohammed bin Saeed Al Jaber, met with UN humanitarian coordinator in Yemen, David Gracie. The meeting discussed efforts to alleviate the human suffering of the Yemeni people, in addition to discussing the importance of quickly enabling experts to check and maintain safer oil tanker. Military sources in Hajjah Governorate reported that the government forces continue to secure the west and south of the city of Harad, while more than 50 Houthi elements have given up. A military source stated that the government forces are continuing to secure the liberated sites west and south of the city of Harad. The forces of the 5th Military Region destroyed vehicles and missiles by coalition airstrikes and artillery shelling inside the city of Harad. Liberation of Harad opens the way to liberating other districts in Hajjah, whose population is close to 3 million. Also, sources confirm the liberation of Harad secures the line linking the governorates of Hudaydah and Hajjah with a length of 70 kilometers. This report has more details.
A new front and a new victory for the government forces in Yemen. The recent victories in Harad are very important given the strategic and military location in which the city is located. The importance of Harad lies in the fact that it is an important border crossing linking Yemen with neighboring Saudi Arabia. By controlling the city and liberating it from the hands of the Houthi militia, the government forces have achieved a number of victories. These include military, political, and economic victories. Looking at these achievements from a military point of view, the liberation of Harad would provide the government forces mass popularity in the areas under the control of the militia. This makes it easier for the government forces to advance towards the liberation of the rest of Hajjah Governorate. The liberation of Harad is an essential key to liberating the strategic mountain range controlled by the Houthis around this area. Regarding political victories, the government forces are gaining control over political negotiations with the Houthis. This will shift the political balance out from the Houthi hands and making the option of a military solution the only one to negotiate with this terrorist group. The liberation of Harad also closes any calls for political negotiations with the Houthis, from the point that whoever has power on the ground is the one who can control all military and political decisions. As to the economic side, the city of Harad has economic and commercial importance, as it is a major crossing for goods to save the national economy from the militia's control over it. With the control of the government forces on Harad, it also worked to open the most important popular commercial market, with the Houthis close to depriving millions of Yemenis from their daily income. Harad Market was a commercial forum for all people in Yemen, and it is an important outlet for commercial movement and daily economic activity. Controlling Harad is considered to be a lifeline, saving citizens from starvation by opening a number of popular markets and opening the way for them to trade with Saudi Arabia. At the end, Harad's liberation will push the government forces close to the main stronghold of Houthis in Sa'da, paving the way for a final downfall for the rebels in Yemen.
Coalition aircraft and government forces artillery targeted Houthi militia sites and gatherings in Ma'rib. Military sources indicated that the aircraft destroyed Houthi militia sites and gatherings in separate areas west of Ma'rib, inflicting heavy human and material losses on them. The joint forces destroyed 2 vehicles and a missile launcher for the Houthi militia, inflicting human losses on them in Taiz, western Yemen. On the same front, a missile launcher of the Houthi militia was destroyed, which tried to target military sites of the joint forces. In light of the non-stop increase in displacement towards Ma'rib, camp students continue to suffer from the struggle of enrolling in education. This is due to either the absence of their documents or the overcrowding of public schools that have exceeded their capacity. This report has more details.
In one of the neighborhoods in the center of the city of Ma'rib, these containers were built in the streets to cover the government's inability to contain the enormous number of students in the city and to provide buildings suitable for education because the city is still witnessing a daily influx of displaced people.
We suffer a lot from overcrowding of students, especially with the displacement crisis in many districts such as Juba and Harib. We're trying to find a solution for the overcrowding of students, so we made up these containers as an alternative. However, it's not enough to cover the deficiency. Students were deprived from their right to education in the last few years due to the lack of schools and exploding them. We gathered the students here together to provide them with a proper education, whether they have documents or not.
Collaborative efforts from everyone manifested in the provision of these containers, all of which support the education system in Ma'rib, so that displaced students obtain their right to education after the Houthi militia denied them access to it.
I'm displaced from Hodeidah. The Houthi militia destroyed my school and I stayed 2 years without education. Then we moved here and I could not enroll as a student because I don't have any documents. It took me 2 years to get my documents from my old school in Hodeidah.
The child Karim Massawi came to Ma'rib displaced from Al-Hodeidah after the militia destroyed his school and forced him and his family to flee. He remained 2 years without an education until he joined October 30 school, which included many displaced students who fled from the militia's controlled areas, as Houthis made the schools a focus for poisoning the minds of children and filling them with hateful, sectarian and racist ideas, and then pushing them towards the battlefronts. Ma'rib is witnessing a large student density in all government schools that has exceeded their absorptive capacity. Exorbitant fees are imposed that make it difficult for families of displaced students to enroll their children, so that the burden remains on government schools, which requires a serious gesture by the government contributing to overcome the difficulties and facilitating students access to their right to education and enabling schools to carry out their national responsibilities in the required manner.
The terrorist Houthi militia buried the bodies of 77 of its militants who were killed early this month on the fighting fronts. Media sources reported that the Houthi commanders included 1 major general, 3 brigadiers, and 5 holding the rank of colonel. Massan project for demining removed 3,855 mines in the first week of February, which were planted by the Houthi militia in various governorates. The project said the number of mines cleared since the beginning of its operation reached about 320,000 mines. Coming next. Vulnerable Yemeni women continue to bear the brunt of the 7-year conflict.
هذا هو محل استهداف الحواث الذين استهدفوا المواطنين وهم نائمين. هذا هو الصاروخ. من الساعة 4 ماشينا الضربة من الحوثي في المخيم. هذا يعني استشهدوا أولاد عمي، هذا استشهدوا أنا أخواني كلهم، يعني شوف يعني الدم في الخيم. الدم في الخيم يعني في كل مكان، يعني رؤوسهم ما التقوش، الراس ما التقاش، الراس ما التقاش.
Welcome back. Official sources warned of an upcoming crisis of domestic gas. A government official said trucks transporting domestic gas coming from the city of Ma'rib were blocked. This report has more details.
Preventing the arrival of trucks loaded with domestic gas coming from Ma'rib imposes an imminent crisis in Aden and the rest of the governorates that Ma'rib delivers gas to. About 2 months ago, the districts of Aden have witnessed a stifling crisis in the matter of domestic gas, after it has almost completely disappeared from most private stations, causing a major crisis. Official sources have warned of an upcoming crisis of domestic gas threatening the city of Aden in the coming days. The Director General of the gas facility in Aden, Murad Nasser, stated that trucks transporting domestic gas coming from the city of Ma'rib were detained. He warned of the outbreak of a crisis due to the detention of trucks and the almost complete lack of material inside the city, if measures are not taken with the concerned authorities. Local sources said that the price of a 20-liter cylinder has risen in recent weeks to 15,000 rials, while long queues of transport vehicles operating with the same substance stand in front of private stations. Local residents in the city of Aden complained about the continued lack of domestic gas and oil derivatives. Amid suspicious government silence, they demanded the Ministry of Oil and the oil and gas companies to provide the two materials to the citizens to ease their living burdens. Citizens attributed this to what they called government chaos and the absence of oversight at the oil company, the ministry, and transportation offices. They also demanded a reduction in fuel prices in line with the depreciation of the US dollar against the national currency. They held the ministry responsible for not announcing updated pricing that coincides with the recovery of the currency's value, and demanded that violators from the owners of gas stations and transport vehicles should be caught. People suffer from deteriorating living conditions as a result of the war. Domestic gas and fuel crisis has constituted an additional burden and doubled the suffering of citizens in light of the deteriorating economic and living situation.
While the conflict in Yemen has had a terrible impact on all civilians, women and girls have been badly affected. They are facing the challenges of limited access to food, water, sanitation, and healthcare services. This report has more details.
Yemenis have suffered the devastation left in the wake of numerous wars. Women, in particular, have suffered disproportionately heavy burdens as a result of the war. They have faced tyranny rooted in far more than conflict, from child marriage to discriminatory legal systems. Wives, mothers, and daughters bear the brunt of men's absence, taking on new responsibilities with no preparation. As men pack for war, economic responsibilities get relegated to women, who are faced with the sudden need to market and provide. This relegation of tasks resulted in a shift in gender roles, and although the role shift has elevated women's status in society, it has also caused a spike in the rate of domestic violence as men start to feel emasculated by the change. Women's rights organizations have reported the persecution of women who voice their opposition to the Houthis. Women also face prevalent arbitrary detention, physical and sexual violence in prison, and unfounded prostitution charges. Those most affected by the extreme levels of disease are women, among whom are breastfeeding and malnourished, who are at higher risk of contracting cholera. Despite the risks, women may be less likely to seek medical attention owing to a lack of autonomy and control over household resources. All the while, girls sadly remain a currency for war-torn households. Destitute families have married off girls as young as 8 years old in the hopes of rectifying their financial situations. Forced and early marriage of girls has tripled in the last years, and nearly 1 in 5 households are headed by women under the age of 18. Despite the obstacles stacked against them, women continue to be vehicles of positive change, firmly positioned at the forefront of efforts to prevent disease spread. They play an important role since they are in charge of allocating resources and educating family members about hygiene. While the conflict has left its effects on all civilians, Yemeni women in particular have taken on the bulk of the distress. Various afflictions, such as patriarchal attitudes and economic inequality, have left women more vulnerable to the effects of war.
Ma'rib Health Office made a health unit for the displaced in Al Jufaina camp. The move aims at fighting the epidemics that face the displaced families in the camp. Field medical teams were also distributed in 6 schools in the same camp, providing medical services, psychological support services to students and teachers. The health system in Yemen has been extremely weakened after 7 years of the conflict. About half of the health facilities in the country is out of service, while many of the functioning centers have very limited capacities. This report has more details.
The Yemeni health sector is suffering from the consequences of prolonged and ongoing armed conflict, economic decline, and institutional collapse. Availability of functioning health infrastructure, such as hospitals and primary care centers, has dwindled under the weight of conflict, with a significant share of the population having challenges with access to health care. Currently, only 50% of the health facilities are fully functional, and over 80% of the population faces significant challenges in reaching food, drinking water, and access to healthcare services. Shortage of human resources, equipment, and supplies are severely hindering healthcare provision. Furthermore, conflict has exacerbated health challenges and resulted in weak governance for the healthcare sector. Deteriorating health conditions are reflected in different shapes, such as high levels of child malnutrition, low immunization rates, and outbreaks of communicable diseases. Maternal and child health are particularly affected by the worsening situation, with latest estimates pointing to 1 mother and 6 newborns dying every 2 hours. Additionally, conflict has also taken a direct toll on the health of the population and is now estimated to be the 3rd main cause of death in Yemen. Decreased external funding for health coupled with unprecedented challenges such as COVID-19 raise uncertainty about the future of health services in Yemen. The health system is extremely reliant on external funding, and the provision of health services is depending on development partners executing health programs. External financing for health has dropped drastically. With the ongoing war, Yemen will lose more of its health infrastructure. Nothing can stop such depletion but immediate end of the conflict.
The National Committee Against Coronavirus recorded 12 new cases of the pandemic. Committee officials said 22 recovered cases were recorded and 6 deaths. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The United Nations says that more than 13,000 people forced to flee their homes by the start of the new year. David Greasley discusses Yemen's humanitarian crisis with Saudi officials in Riyadh. Liberating the city of Herat paves the way to final battle against Houthi militia. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.